Okay, picture this. It's a situation that has happened to absolutely every single one of us. You get some money you didn't actually work for, right? Maybe it was a tax refund, a birthday gift, a surprise bonus at work, or maybe just a lucky night out. It hits your account and then almost immediately, poof, it's gone. And I bet it felt totally different from your regular paycheck, didn't it? Like it was lighter, somehow, less real. And before you even had a chance to really sit down and think about it, it quietly slipped away into, expensive dinners, spontaneous online shopping carts, and things you can barely even remember buying, like, that artisanal cheese board you've used exactly once. Well, listen, you are definitely not alone. We're going to unpack exactly why this happens to the best of us.
So I want you to ask yourself honestly, where did your last tax refund actually go? Because if we're being totally honest with ourselves, we know it would have lasted way longer if we had earned it the hard way. But here is the absolutely crucial thing I want you to take away right off the bat. You didn't waste it on purpose. You didn't necessarily feel reckless at the time either. This vanishing act, it's not a coincidence, and it is certainly not a character flaw. It's actually one of the most consistent, deeply ingrained, and well-documented patterns in all of behavioral economics. And I promise you, once we break down exactly why your brain does this, you are never going to look at a windfall the same way again.
Let's run a little thought experiment. Say a $500 paycheck and a $500 tax refund hit your bank account on the exact same day. Now, mathematically, $500 is just $500. But psychologically, they are completely different beasts. That paycheck feels heavy, it feels real, and it lasts long because you are fiercely protective of it. The tax refund, though, it feels incredibly light, almost like Monopoly money, and it vanishes quickly. So why on earth do we treat the exact same amount of money sitting right there in the exact same bank account so completely differently?
Well, the answer comes down to a really fascinating concept called mental accounting. This term was coined by the Nobel Prize-winning University of Chicago economist Richard Thaler, and his central insight was deceptively simple, but honestly, completely revolutionary. He discovered that our brains actively sort our money into these invisible psychological buckets based entirely on where that money came from. So you've got the bucket for money you earn through grueling labor, right? And that one has a very, very tight seal. And then there's the bucket for money that arrived without any effort at all, and that one, it has a remarkably loose seal.
To really understand why this is so weird, we kind of have to look at the word fungible. Now, in traditional economics, money is supposed to be fungible. That basically just means it is entirely interchangeable. $1 should behave exactly like every other dollar, regardless of its origin. That is how money is supposed to work, in theory, on a spreadsheet. But Thaler's research proved that this is absolutely not how money works in your brain. In your mind, the mental bucket determines your behavior, not the actual numbers on your bank balance.
But to understand why our brains actually do this, we have to go way back, like way back before money even existed. UCLA psychologist Hal Hershfield has studied this extensively. You see, for most of human history, our hunter-gatherer ancestors lived in these small groups of roughly 50 to 150 people, and resources, they arrived completely unpredictably. A successful hunt meant a massive surplus of meat that literally couldn't be stored. So your brain learned a very specific survival mechanism. Unexpected surplus was temporary, it was a social thing, and it was meant to be consumed quickly or shared with the group. Actually, hoarding a windfall back then was super dangerous. It marked you as someone who didn't share. Your deep neural architecture still carries that exact ancient logic today. Earned income feels durable, but windfall income feels transient, and our brains tell us that transient things need to be spent right now.
But wait, there is a second, even more powerful mechanism operating right underneath this. Back in a landmark 2001 MIT study, researchers Drazen Prelek and Duncan Simister documented something they called the pain of paying. They found that people who pay with cash, people who physically feel the money leaving their hands, spend significantly less than those who use credit cards or windfalls. And why is that? It's because the physical act of handing over cash triggers genuine emotional friction. It physically hurts just a little bit. And that small psychological sting acts as an automatic brake on your spending.
Think about how this applies to the hard-earned money you bring home. When you work for your money, you pay a massive psychological cost to earn it. The hours, the sheer effort, the absolute discomfort, it all becomes deeply emotionally attached to every single dollar you receive. Earned income comes preloaded with painful memories. You remember that meeting that dragged on 2 hours late. You remember that one project that almost broke your spirit. You remember commuting in the freezing rain. Spending that money cost you something emotionally, not just financially. So your brain naturally creates friction. You hesitate. You think twice before tapping your card.
Windfalls, however, a completely different story. Windfall income arrives with zero memory of effort embedded in it.
There is absolutely no residue of discomfort. I mean, you didn't have to commute in the freezing rain for that tax refund. You didn't have to sit through a terrible, endless meeting for that birthday check from your aunt. Because there is no memory of effort, there is zero psychological friction. There's no brake pedal. The money simply moves faster out of your account because there is literally nothing in your ancient neural architecture telling you to slow down.
This perfectly explains one of the most puzzling phenomena in all of finance. Economist Guido Iannicola and Jay Zagorski found something wild. You'd think winning the lottery would just permanently fix your life, right? But no. Their research shows a huge portion of lottery winners end up in even worse financial shape within just 3 to 5 years. And why? Because millions of dollars suddenly arrived in their loose bucket. It had zero memory of effort attached, so it was spent at breakneck loose bucket speed. Once it was gone, their old financial habits just took over again. Contrast that with people we call intentional labelers, people who actively shift that unexpected money into their earned bucket. Those people actually see lasting wealth accumulation.
Now, there's another layer to this whole thing that almost nobody talks about, and that's the social dimension. Psychologist Brad Klontz, who studies these things called money scripts, has documented how the emotional context surrounding windfall money totally shapes its fate. Social windfalls carry these invisible spending instructions. Think about it for a second. A bonus at work often feels like explicit permission to go celebrate. A birthday gift, that feels like it is fundamentally meant to be enjoyed, not locked away in some boring savings account. And an inheritance? That's heavily tied to grief, so it often gets spent impulsively just to escape the pain of having to look at it. The emotion literally becomes the spending instruction. So the big question, how do we actually outsmart our own brains? Well, it comes down to one absolutely crucial rule. You have to separate the emotion from the money. And look, you can't just suppress the emotion. That never works. Instead, behavioral economists recommend this really deliberate intervention called mental resourcing. This simply means consciously, intentionally narrating a brand new origin story for that windfall money to yourself. You are actively updating the emotional tag that your brain has placed on those funds, because remember, that invisible tag determines exactly what happens next.
If you want some real-life proof of how powerful this is, look at this fascinating 2012 study by Shlomo Benartzi and his colleagues. They looked specifically at tax refunds. When people received a refund and immediately thought of it as a government gift, it went straight into the loose bucket, and they spent it incredibly fast on fun, discretionary items. But when people took just a moment to view that exact same refund as deferred wages, basically reminding themselves, hey, this is money I worked hard for, I overpaid my taxes, and this is just owed back to me, it completely shifted into the secure, heavy bucket. It started to feel earned, and suddenly they spent it slowly and carefully.
Okay, let's turn all this theory into action. Here are 3 concrete daily habits you can adopt right now to pause and outsmart your own ancient neural architecture. Step 1. Stop before you spend. Literally, the moment unexpected money hits your account, just freeze. Step 2. Identify your brain's default mental bucket. Ask yourself, did I just categorize this as a fun bonus or a temporary surplus? Just acknowledge that invisible instruction. And step 3. Consciously relabel it. Mentally tag it as deferred wages or physically connected to a long-term goal that requires effort. By doing this, you're manually adding that psychological friction right back in.
So I want to leave you with this final, provocative question to ask yourself the very next time money just effortlessly arrives in your life. What bucket do you actually want it to be in? Because the money you didn't earn is just as real as the money you sweat for. It belongs to you. It has the power to compound, grow, and completely alter your financial future across decades, but only if you choose to give it the psychological weight of money you labored for. How you answer this question is going to determine whether your next windfall actually changes your life or simply passes right through it.